Welcome or welcome back. For those who don't know me, my name is Money and this is Conversations in the Chair, a space where I share different topics about things I'm going through, gone through and grown through, a digital journal so to speak, all in the hopes to encourage and inspire you. For this week on the podcast, we are talking about stewarding the gifts and ideas that God gives us and what it looks like, how it feels, the ups and downs, and how we work through that. I have to admit that I have been finding this particular episode, finding the time and the mental bandwidth to do this particular episode, a bit of a struggle. Some might say procrastinating, which is interesting because I'm not one to procrastinate, I don't think. So I think I know the reason why, but we can get into that. So here we are, another episode. And what's interesting is that this episode is about gifts and ideas and talents that God gives us. Earlier in this year, in fact, at the start of this year, I was given the idea and the title for this podcast, Conversations in the Chair. So it was in the middle of the night and I was asleep and it came to me, and I have a notepad and pen by my bed, and I kind of woke up and scribbled it down. And what was interesting, that when the title of the podcast came to me, so did the visual, which is actually the thumbnail that you often see. It was like I was taken on a tour of my living room and shown exactly, the visuals to go with the podcast. So the next day I got up all excited and did a whole photo shoot in my living room and did the thumbnail and, set that aside. And then I kind of sat for a couple of days to think about what kind of episodes, what kind of subjects I wanted to talk about. I knew I wanted to have open and honest conversations. I knew I wanted it to be a digital journal. So things that, I'm going through or have gone through, and by all accounts, you grow through what you go through. That's the hoping anyway. And so I started to sketch out, my intro, and a couple of episode ideas started to come to me. And in terms of, subject matter, I thought I would just look back on the last few years of my life and what I've gone through, some painful, some good. Some of them were learning opportunities, most definitely learning opportunities, etc., etc. And the lessons within all of that. So I sketched out maybe 3 to 5, I want to say about 5 episodes, and off I went, setting up to film these, YouTube videos essentially about these subject matters that I have had sketched out. And with all these kind of creative things, you have to carve out time to film and edit, and you've got to consider lighting, and if you're going to film with natural lighting, there's certain points in the day and that you have to film, and you've got to find a good spot in your home with good light to film. Like, all those variables come into it. Like, if it's a cloudy day, which it often is, it's London, you've got to take into account. But I persevered. I, set myself up. I had my tripod, I had my ring light, my youngest daughter even helped me. She is a budding film director, so she loved all of that. She was very good with cueing me and telling me to speak up and look at the camera and all that good stuff. And religiously every week for like 5-6 weeks I would film and upload these videos onto YouTube, spending time editing, doing the thumbnail, and etc, etc. I think that there was one particular episode where my mic had cut out for some random reason, so I had to do a voiceover. I think even one week my old laptop died, so I had to go get a new laptop. But there was all these other little things in the way that kind of tried to throw me off, but I just took a deep breath and kept pushing through. I'm pretty good at that. And the views after all that work were low, like low, not non-existent, that's not fair, but they were really low. And I'm not a one-dimensional person. I have other interests and hobbies, so I would often upload shorts or other videos on YouTube about stuff I'm doing in the garden, what's growing, what's not growing, what's been eaten by snails before I can even nurture them to fruit and harvest. And those kind of videos were getting so many views, and I couldn't understand it because it was the same amount of subscribers, but the number of views on each video was completely different. There was one particular short, was it a short? I think it was a short that I posted, and it got something like 800 plays, and I'm like, it was such a head scratcher. I could not understand how this, I don't know, 60-second maybe video of what's grown in my window box could get so much views, but it's something I have taken days to put together, to script, to research, to look back on emotionally, because obviously this is a digital journal, so there are some topics that I have to revisit, and I have to be mindful of how it may or may not trigger me, or and I'm hoping it hasn't triggered me, because the whole point of it is that you grow and you move on. I mean, you may not feel the same way, but you certainly won't forget. You can forgive, but you won't forget. So you will take all this time to put together, I don't know, anything from a 12-minute to sometimes 20-minute video on YouTube about quite meaty, in-depth, intellectually grounded, emotionally intelligent and stimulating conversation, and it get next to, comparatively next to no views. Okay, I say next to no views. It may get, I don't know, 22 views or 29 views. But if I post something about, what's going on in my garden, it get 800 plays. And I'm like, I do not understand this. So that being said, you know what happens next. You start to get despondent. You start to lose motivation. You start to kind of question the idea. Now, I know this was a God-given idea. I know that for a fact. Don't mind me. I'm sitting here recording, and I'm enjoying a cup of coffee. So if you hear me sip, you know why. I questioned the idea, the validity, Am I doing something wrong? Are people not interested? Etc. etc. And, you know, years and years ago, I started a different YouTube channel. I say started. I had like registered the name, etc., but I didn't post anything. And there are particular reasons around why I didn't post at that time. So the the channel name, I think, still exists out there in the ether, but there's no content. And then life started lifing even more. You know, you get busy. I travel for work occasionally. So it just never, came to anything. And I think the night back in January, I must have been thinking about the whole, you know, doing content for myself, YouTube channels, etc., etc., which this particular channel, or the channel that I have now, I started last year. And I was just thinking about, how to grow the channel, what kind of content's going to work on there, what kind of content creator do I want to be? Do I want to be a full-time content creator? Is it just a hobby and a pastime? So that was clearly in my thoughts as I went to sleep. And it was as if, God heard those thoughts, and it was like he gave me the idea for the podcast. So I was like, oh, okay. So I've been doing all this work since the beginning of the year and not really seeing any results. And it's disheartening, to say the least. So I took a break from it and didn't post anything, didn't create anything. Because I figured, why am I doing all this work? And anyone out there who's done any type of content creation knows how much work goes into it. Whether it's just filming or audio, it still takes a lot of work, time and effort, mentally and physically. So I took a break, I stepped back, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but in my heart of hearts, I know that this was a God-given idea, so I can't sleep on it. I can't not nurture it. And all that kept coming to mind was the parable of the sower. I think it's in Matthew, where the man gives his servants talents or money or something, and one of them doubles it. I think one's given 5 and he doubles it. One's given 3 and he doubles it, and then one's given 1 and he kind of hides it in the ground. And then when the man comes back, the 2 that have doubled it are like, hey, look what I've done, I've doubled it. And then the servant who hid it in the ground, the owner wasn't best pleased, to say the least. And I'm like, I don't want to be that one servant who doesn't do anything. I want to double these talents. I want to double these opportunities. I want to grow and nurture them and, see what comes of it. But am I doing something wrong? Nothing's coming of it. I've been working on it for, week after week. And I think some of that comes from this this instant validation that we all look for, this instant gratification. They call it the microwave culture. You want things quickly, you want to see results quickly, you want to see a return on your investment quickly. Bearing in mind, I'd only originally recorded 6 episodes on YouTube, so that was 6 weeks. And the numbers, as I said, were really low. So I had to kind of think, oh, come on. Like, are you really going to like jack it in after 6 weeks? You're going to have to work at this. And me rolling up my sleeve to work at things, I'm not afraid to do that at all. But part of me, I think, was just kind of tired of not seeing return on my investments, whatever those investments were. You know, whether it could be anything. It could be like all the work I do in my garden. If you're a gardener, you know that this year, this growing season has been bloody awful. And, you know, all that time, effort, and money you put into, you know, buying seeds and buying soil and buying organic soil and fertilizer and watering the garden and, you know, nutrients and all that kind of stuff. And you don't get I certainly didn't get the biggest harvest this year. Some things did well in relation to last year, and some things didn't even produce any fruit. So the return on the investment has been very low, if anything at all. So, you know, the low viewership on those YouTube videos back in January was just another thing. I was like, oh, this is going to be another thing where it's just poor return on my investment. So I took a step back, as I said. I remember just sort of journaling one day, and I asked the question, like, is this a video podcast or an audio podcast? And you know, I left it as that. I figured I'd wait for some sort of answer to come. And one day this summer, I was out with a friend. We were in the park and we were just talking about things, and I was talking about, you know, being creative and all these different pastimes and how I'm trying to nurture these ideas, and some are just things that I want to pursue for myself, but others are definitely God-given ideas and I really want to steward them well. And then I mentioned the whole thing about conversations in the chair, and it's got really low numbers, etc. And my friend said to me, maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's an audio podcast, because when they are watching mine, they don't actually watch it, they play it and they're doing something else, and I'm just sort of on in the background and they're listening rather than watching it. And I was like, maybe I've just received the answer to the question. But my friend didn't know that was a question that I had been sort of ruminating over. But I did say, oh, you know, maybe you saying this to me is an answer to a prayer, because it's something that's been on my mind for a while. And I want to be a good steward of this because I feel like God has given this to me. But it's just, I'm not seeing anything of it yet. So here we are, doing audio versions of conversations in the chair. And, you know, they're still being uploaded onto YouTube, but now they can also be found on Spotify. So we're going to see how this goes, because ultimately I want to hear God say, well done, my good and faithful servant. You know, it's like he's going to ask me, I gave you this idea, what did you do with it? So here we are, still chugging away at this. So how about you guys? let's have a conversation. What ideas do you feel that you've been given and you are doing your best to steward them? Um, and what does it mean to be a steward, a good steward? Um, and recognizing that some of these gifts and ideas are actually God given. And it's important that we pray about these kind of gifts and what He wants us to do, the strategy, like to execute these gifts. Pray about how we honestly feel when we feel despondent. It's like, okay, you've given me this idea, I'm doing all the work, but where's the audience? Where's the clients? Like, maybe your idea is to start a business and you've started the business and it's like, okay, I've registered the business, I've done all, I've got all my tax numbers, etc., done the website, done the social media platform. Where are they? There's going to be times you want to give up. I hold my hand up to that. Maybe we don't give up. Maybe we just step back and look at it from a different angle, or just wait for further instruction, wait for clarification, wait for encouragement. Sometimes it's just an encouraging word from somebody who's like, no, you're doing the right thing. You just have to keep chugging away at it. I knew that this particular episode would be a challenge. I knew I wanted to do it, but I knew it'd be a challenge because it's like all of these, it's close to home. Because I'm like, oh man, I need to see the fruits of where I've been putting my time, my effort, my energy, my money. Where are the listeners? Where's the audience? What's going on? Some might say that there's an element of overcoming fear and doubt. Now, I acknowledge that, the common challenges of fear, doubt, imposter syndrome, etc., all of that exists, but we have to, I think we just have to keep the faith and know that if God's given us the idea, it's not going to come back void, or it can't come back void. Can I get an amen? But fear and doubt is a real thing. I think for me, it wasn't a case of fear. It was maybe doubt. After a while of, I say a while, it was 6 weeks of filming every week, editing, etc., and not seeing these huge numbers. And it's like, am I doing this right? Am I the right person for this? Does anyone care? All those kind of questions. I think I don't think I was fearful. I think I was maybe a little bit apprehensive initially about being on camera, particularly as my line of work, I'm very much behind the scenes. So I had to put myself at the forefront and in front of the camera, and yeah, that took some getting used to. I don't think I was afraid. I just think it was just nerves that I had to overcome. And I did. Because like I said, I'm not one to shy away from work. I'm not one to shy away from getting things done, accomplishing things on my to-do list. But it's that, it's coming away from that microwave mindset. Like, you put things in for 3 minutes and, you hear the ding and it's done, it's hot, it's ready. These kind of things are the long game, and you've got to be in it for the long haul, right? I'm quite an ambitious person, always have been, and I know many of us are, but at the same time, it's like I need to balance ambition and God's purpose. I need to kind of do away with imposter syndrome, because it's like, oh my God, can I do this? Who am I to think I could do this? Blah, 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 blah. Those kind of negative talk that can easily talk ourselves out of things. Put your hand up if you agree. Yeah. What I've learnt, or what I'm learning to do, is just stay faithful in the small things. And what does that look like? It's showing up every week with my microphone, with my cup of coffee or tea, but this week it's coffee, and hit record. Hit record, stay faithful in it, do the work, and I suppose at the right time it will come. The audience will build, whether that's on YouTube or Spotify or both, and the interaction and the engagement, that all that will come with it. But if I'm not showing up with an episode week after week, then you got to be in it to win it, right? So I'm doing my best to be faithful with the small things, just being diligent and faithful, even in having designated time to record. Like today, for instance, I know I had a couple of hours this afternoon to do it, so I'm doing it. I'm not filling that time with something else, because I knew in my heart and in my mind that I was finding it a bit of a challenge. I knew there were, I don't know if it was obstacles, but it was just like, this is such a real subject. I also want to do it justice. I also want to have all my notes and all my Bible scriptures and etc. But at the same time, could one be using those things as excuses not to do it? You know what I mean? Like, who's going to tell me off from not knowing word for word the parable of the sower, or the parable of the talents? There you go. That's what I meant. No one is going to tell me off, because even if you put it into Google, the parable of the talents, it's going to bring up the answer for you. And just to, ensure that I am correctly referencing, there we go, parable of the talents. Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. And the master gives his servants different amounts of talents, and then returns to find that some have increased the value of their gifts while others have not. I want to be one of those servants that increased the value of what was given. I know back in January, take your time to say these words, this idea was given to me. And there's seed time and harvest, isn't there? It's not when you plant the seed, is when you harvest it. And it's not just because I like to garden did I also throw in that reference, but it's true. And I just have to stay with it. These things don't happen overnight, unfortunately. Trust in God's timing. Oh, this is an interesting point. Sometimes the vision or the idea God gives us takes time to manifest. And it's important. And I know I'm speaking to myself. And I know when I play this back, it's going to be like, yeah, you're at the front of the queue to take these notes. But we have to be patient and trust in God's timing. I mean, look at Abraham. It's probably one of my favorite stories. And Joseph as well. Not Joseph, David. God said to Abraham or Abram that he'd be a father. He'd have a son, and then he'd also have like so many children that he couldn't even count them. And that took 25 years to come into play. I've mentioned this story in a previous podcast. And Abram and Sarah, I know for a fact, enough times they would have been like, yo, bro, when is this thing happening? Because it's been a year, it's been 2 years, it's been 5 years. And even when the visitors stayed with Abram and Sarah, and they said to Sarah that, you know, this time next year she'll have a son. I hope I'm not getting these stories mixed up. And she laughed. Yeah. Sarah laughed. She was like, yeah, whatever. Because, like, she was already old and she'd already been waiting all this time. So she kind of gave up hope. And I've got to admit that there's times when I've thought about something or someone has said something to me which kind of rings true, but at the same time I kind of scoff and roll my eyes like, yeah, we'll see. So we all have Abraham and Sarah moments, and even who did I say? David. David was what, 17 when he was anointed by Samuel, and he got told to go back in the field and carry on looking after the sheep. And how many years was it before he became king? And look what he went through. And then Jesus himself, born of Mary. And I'm pretty sure we don't hear about him until he's like 12 or 18 when he's in the temple. And then we don't hear about him again until he's 30. And then, you know, he does a lot of stuff in 3 years. So I know it's all about timing, and then everyone says, oh, trust God's timing, trust the timing of your life. But, can we all just be real about this and say how hard it is to trust that timing? Can we like just be real for a minute and say that, yes, there's times when our faith has dwindled. There's times when we've given up. There's times when we've scoffed and rolled our eyes at it. Because, you know, it's been 2 years, it's been 5. Or maybe even longer. I know there's certain things that I don't even, or I no longer bring up in prayer to God, because I'm like, you know what, it has been a long time since you said this to me, and here we are, how many years on, and it still hasn't happened. So now I don't even bring it up, because what's the point, right? And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I mean that I've had to reside in the thought, in the knowledge that I can't make this happen any sooner, any quicker. God's not a man to lie. If it's going to happen, it will happen when it happens. And I'm just going to stop going on about it, because it's just going to upset me. So I'ma leave it in his in tray. Thank you for putting it on my radar, but this is in your in tray to get to. So I no longer bring things up now. If you said it, then you have to deal with it. I can only do my part. And if I've done my part and nothing comes of it, then maybe it's just not the time yet. And we can be pragmatic, we can be, sensible. But the whole trusting God's timing is still a challenge. And I'd be interested to have a conversation with anyone who says, oh yeah, it's easy to sit and wait on God's timing, blah, blah, blah. Especially when you've done what you can do. And it's like, this is now out of my hands. I've done my bit. I'd like to have a conversation with you. Hit me up if you are off the thinking, the mindset that, yeah, man, just sit back and wait. It's all good. It's all good. It's cool. Just trust God's timing. Because I know Abraham and Sarah would have been like, nah, this isn't happening. In their big age, they're going to be like having kids. Yeah. But that's all we can do, really. How are you, or how can you begin to steward your gifts today? What are you doing? What's in your playbook? How do you do this? What gifts are you stewarding? What's been given to you to look after as a custodian? And how are you finding it? Is it a walk in the park? Is it a challenge? Have you had to put it down? Same way I did. I had to put this podcast down for a few months and then come back to it this summer. How do you feel about that? Are you now dragging yourself over hot coals for taking some time out? Or has it allowed you to regroup and come back with a new sense of purpose, a new drive, a new motivation? Has it helped? I hope it has. It's helped me to step away, and I think stepping away is good. It gives you some perspective. It allows you to maybe look at things or come at things from a different angle. But how are you stewarding your gifts? Let's have a conversation. I hope that whatever it is that you're working on, whatever it is you're chipping away at this year, that it brings forth so much fruit you cannot house it. And I wish you all the best in all the endeavours and all the ideas that God gives you. Remember to keep a pen and paper near your bed, because I feel that He will give us so many more gifts and ideas to kind of bring to fruition on this earth. I've been your host, Money, and this has been another episode of Conversations in the Chair. Till next time, take care. Bye-bye.